Did everyone manage to get a day or two off? To revel? To reflect at all?
I mean, personally, it was awful. I had a lurgy which lasted about 3.5 weeks.
Oh, wow. What, did you get flu?
Something like that, yeah. I just couldn't shake it off. The whole family got it.
Oh, geez, even worse. Had to quarantine yourselves again.
It didn't feel like being in lockdown, yeah.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry. I mean, you expect some kind of self-induced illness over Christmas, don't you? But not 3.5 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I turned to drink in the end.
Well, you have to. Hot toddy your way through it. That's my solution.
Should I kick off? Happy New Year?
Hello, Happy New Year, Chris. You generally do, don't you? As is the way, so.
Well, Kieran's carried it for the last couple of weeks, so I'll give him a rest.
Look at him sat there in his live
How
shirt.
many of your lads have been away with England, and was Ben going to go? Did he go, and how's his ankle?
We had 6 away. Do you want me to go through names?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Not all of them tested fully. Bev, Tom Curry, George Ford, Rafi Quirk, Johnny Hill, Manu Tuolangi. So Ben Curry doesn't come into that list, does he, unfortunately? And his foot's fine. It's his plantar fascia in his foot. Kieran? That is not an injury that need put you out for any length of time because you're able to still have the running mechanisms. It's just very, very painful. And it's only truly healed when it fully tears. So he tore it going into the game, tore it in the game. That's why it looked like it broke his ankle. But then as soon as that initial pain subsides from the tear, you're able to run it again. Hence why he almost got a man of the match winning performance. It's quite extraordinary. But he had to go through some pain barriers to get there. But we're not overrunning him in that sense.
Are you surprised that he wasn't involved with England?
Not on that performance, no. He had a brilliant performance against Leicester. But he's dipped in and out of injury, unfortunately for him, prior to that in the last monthly block. So I think if he continues to string consistent performances like that, I don't know how you could ignore him. He's every bit.
Because there is a question, can you play both together? Peyton, you could play both together, or you could have one. It's like the nightmare scenario, isn't it? Tom Curry's going up, oh Christ, here comes Ben Curry. It's an interesting scenario you could put together for what they bring to the game, which is so similar in terms of strength, ball stealing, and just physicality in the tackles we saw a number of times against Leicester.
Yeah, you go back a year and a half, and I think there was perhaps a bigger contrast in the playing styles. I think Tom was more contact orientated and focused, and Ben was largely existed in those wider channels. I think there's been a coming together of their style of play in recent months, really, and that was evident the weekend. They were both brilliant through contact, weren't they? And also cutting lines, winning turnovers, like the complete rugby players. Brilliant, yeah.
Is Rafi set for this weekend?
No, he was never going to be, from my understanding, but he was out training today.
And George is still on course around Toulouse, or?
That'd be a push. Toulouse being next week, I think we're looking more like Bath, and even then. If I've said Toulouse before, I apologise for leading you down the garden path. I might have said Toulouse back in June, but my understanding of it, that over the last few weeks, it's a 6 to 9 month setback, and Bath is more realistic in and around that time.
Okay, last one for me. I asked you this before, and you said they haven't been in touch, but given the way that Rob's form has continued throughout the season, have the Springboks at all shown any interest in a guy who patently is more likely to stay on the field than Andre Pollard?
No, they haven't been in touch. They're good communicators when they're in the country or in your organisation, really good communicators then, but outside of that, I don't speak to them too much. Having said that, I did speak to Andy Edwards last night, who's an old friend of mine, who's their high performance director, and I put a quiet word in, and I said, "What's the buzz?" And he said, he mentioned, he said, "Look, how are we not looking at this guy?" So it has been talked around in inner circles. That much I know, but there's been no outward communication as to his future involvement. That's insider knowledge, that, Chris. Like, that is hot off the press. That's last night on a social phone call. So you can only quote me on that. It's been talked around on a passive conversation in inner circles, not like as a...
So it's understood, yeah. But you wouldn't be surprised that they are talking about it in their inside circle, because its consistent form must warrant some consideration.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Yeah. I don't know.
It surprised you because consistency wasn't there last year, but it was probably when he had his first time with you, when you weren't there, when he came over for a short period. But he seems to have played with a confidence that maybe was lacking at times, maybe because of injury. He seems to have got that now.
Yeah, I believe there was more in Rob than what we were seeing, because you could see it in training and when the gloves were off, when the shackles, when he was free, in training. So I believe there was more in him. And even in terms of some of his execution, that was some of the conversations we had back end of last year as to how we could get consistent performance in training now that hopefully could transfer into games. I think I talked you through this process. We just have a little catch up, because I'm not the guy to be able to give him advice on what the right decisions or wrong decisions are, right? In what he's doing at the line with the ball, which is kind of pretty much what we're talking about here, I believe. Yeah, I got feedback off him after every session as to how he thought he went out of 10, and so making sure that we were aligned. I don't do that anymore. Like and whether or not that's built up an understanding of trust and alignment through his performance. I hope it has. I hope I've had some influence. You'd have to. I sort of sat down with him yesterday because he started every game, and I'm like, "How are you, Rob?" Like I'm not asking you. I tend not to ask you because he's communicating. He's playing so well. He's so much in flow. Like, you don't want to break it, do you? You don't want to ask the question that makes him introspect to the extent where he falls out of form. But he feels good. He feels he's got more ownership than what he's had, hence why we made him captain. And whether or not that has led into his state of flow and form, or whether it's his state of flow and form that has enabled him to take more ownership, I don't know which, but I'm sure the two are related. He's got...
Does that make it difficult when George is fit then? Because the assumption, from those outside the club is, and George Ford is fit, he'll wander in, he'll play 10.
It's a challenge. It is a real challenge, particularly how well Sam James played, because as we know, Rob can play at 13 as well. And I do think Rob's sabbatical at 13, with AJ being there, look, firstly, it might have derailed him in terms of his own perception of his standing within the group. If he wanted to play 10 and he's been shifted to 13 to accommodate, two good players rather than just the one, then maybe that affected his confidence last year. But going back into it this year, with the wider understanding of where the space existed, with an increased ability to drive at the line, which he's doing, he's a real attacking threat at the line himself. I think it's only improved his overall performance at 10. And and you couple that with the responsibility he's got with George not being there, and it's elevated his game again. So we're getting there, Chris, I guess. I'm using you as a soundboard here. There's always a few things that contribute to a player's form, and we've probably discovered a few there. With George coming back in again, and the opportunity to use him at 10 or 13, and that's something we'll have to experiment with. But in all honesty, I feel that George is going to go straight to Six Nations, or after a game or two, he should do. So the likelihood is Rob will hold the shirt for at least, till March at this point in time, and then we'll let them play it out then.
Great. Thanks very much, Alex.
Cheers, Chris.
Hi, Alex.
Hello, mate. You're right.
Just a couple from me, if that's all right. Can I just ask, obviously, you mentioned Ben Curry's foot injury there. Is that going to keep him out for a bit then? Or just to be clear, what's the sort of state of play there?
He's up for selection. He trained well today, trained hard today, did the whole session today, moved really well. So, yeah, we're happy with that. The medical team are doing a great job. Really good job.
And you talked to Chris there about, how impressed you've been with him, but just how delighted have you been to see his progress? Because, they obviously came through together, but, Tom has got so many of the headlines in recent times because obviously playing for England, etc. But to see Ben, progressing as he has must be really pleasing.
It's the biggest reinforcement of why I do the job. Honestly, it is. I've worked closer with Ben than I do with Tom because he's here more often, and to some degree he's a lot more open to taking on the responsibility within this organisation, because Tom gets a lot put on him from an international basis. So we've worked hard at trying to improve his communication skills, his leadership skills, as well as some of his reflection on selection, because all these things affect not just his psyche but how he talks to people and his general mood. So I've learned a few things, just as you do when you're working with these lads. So it's been a period of growth for me, as I'm sure as him. So no, I've been really impressed with the man that he is. I'm really impressed. His commitment to continually striving to improve, and it's helped me along the way as a coach.
And you mentioned George there in terms of his comeback, and so you were saying you expect that he might go straight to the Six Nations. Is that something that you've discussed with Steve? Because clearly after such a serious injury to come straight back into Test rugby would be quite a big ask, I'd imagine.
He went to the testing, do you know what I mean? And if I was Steve Borthwick, what would I do in his sizable shoes? I'd go back to a game model that works, and I'd employ some of the people that enabled it. And his invitation to come straight back into the squad, despite him being injured and not being able to do tests, would be an indication of his inclusion during the Six Nations. Whether or not he goes straight back into an international shirt or he plays some time for us in the Prem Cup, potentially, or the Premiership, that's something for me and Steve to thrash out after the decision. I don't know what, I haven't asked him yet. We just said let's play it by ear as we get there. He's obviously quality enough not to have to play, but there's more things than just technique in here, isn't there? And there's that kind of getting the ball in your hands again and stuff, Al.
Yeah, and I guess you've seen with Manu, a player who comes straight back and goes straight back into Test rugby, and maybe, he gets injured again, the risk that can bring,
Yeah, there is that, but Manu's like one of those players who's come straight back in and he's brilliant again, isn't he? There's only a robustness there with Manu, physical robustness, not an aptitude or a confidence that affected his performance. I think I see it's been slightly different with George. You'll see him when he comes back, he's stocky than ever. His metrics in terms of his strength testing and the rest are off the charts. So he's coming back fitter and stronger and probably more robust than where he was. And therein lies the point I made to Chris before, that to lose, of course it's a big game for us, but if he hasn't met certain metrics in his return to play, in his rehabilitation programme, even if he's kicking goals 50 metres and doing spiral bombs for our physios to catch, which he is, we're not going to risk him on that level. We'll make sure he's robust enough to play.
And just lastly from me on George, everyone's been talking about whether it should be Owen Farrell or Mark Smith at 10 for England. I know he hasn't played yet for you, but do you see someone as George as someone who's going to have a big say in that sort of debate moving forwards?
I think, it'll be a love triangle or a hate triangle, as the case may be. Yeah, I think he's quality enough to do that, isn't he? Especially in the style that you'd not assume, but that you could predict both to go down.
Great, thanks for your time.
Cheers.
Afternoon, Alex. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Kieran.
Following on from what Alex just said, when we spoke last week, you mentioned there was a missed call from Steve Borthwick. Was that a specific chat about George, or was it just a general catch-up type phone call?
Yeah, it was the catch-up around the players. In and around some of the conversations he already had with some of those lads, or his past experience with them when he was coaching England, and just to get some of my feedback on him before going into camp. So, yeah, it's quite nice. It's as pleasant as I've ever found him, but that's his job to be pleasant nowadays, isn't it, Steve? Because probably didn't want to be nice to me.
In terms of the general catch-up then, was it just focusing on the players, the six that have been with England this week, or was there also a conversation about, we mentioned Ben Curry, Tom Roebuck was in the training squad in November, so was it a conversation just about the six, or was it a conversation in general about a wider picture of say, all English qualified players?
It ended up being a more detailed conversation around three of them, actually, not even the six. He caught me half an hour before the kick-off against Leicester. That's the only time we had. And we talked for half an hour over Bev and Tom and Johnny.
Was that just a general chat about where they're at, or were they specific conversations about things that he would like to see them doing, or was it just assessing where they're at since the last time they were with an England cap? I know that Steve obviously wasn't England head coach during November.
Yeah, so it's part specifics in terms of what they're going after from a rugby point of view. It was in part mentality as to conversations they've had in the past, which I found really interesting, or I've had in the past, which we believe has motivated them to decent performances for best practice. And a part where they're at. So where they're at right now, what helps them in terms of preparedness mentally, and what they're going after from a rugby point of view. So even when he's having the reintegration of them back into the England squad of them head coach would be aligned with our comms. I think that's why he was doing it. Steve's a brilliant gatherer of information, and he comes from decent stock there, decent pedigree, doesn't he, with Eddie, being his former mentor and boss. I'd spoke to him. He said he spent 12 days just listening to what happened in the autumn internationals, which I thought was really wise. Understanding what had happened there and not to repeat some of those same mistakes potentially. He hasn't even got on at that point with the job of understanding where he's taking it. He was still assessing and gathering information. So for him, it was a bit of information gathering, I'm sure.
I think the word that I would describe the word I'd use to describe Friday night was pretty mega on and off the field, both in terms of performance and result on the fields, attendance, the whole evening. It was a pretty special night.
It was one of those golden nights of rugby union in the Northwest, wasn't it? Like, it seemed like all the planets aligned. Right at the end of the year, for us to finish the year in the vein that we wanted to. And it continued when I went to Hale after that. Took my 80-year-old old man to a pub in Hale and continued to revel in it for a few hours after. The difficulty, as I said to you now, comes with separating that result and that performance from what we face against Quins this weekend. And it's not going to be a continuation of how we finished against Leicester. It's, you're a team who come off the back of a good win with a changing coaching team when we were hurting. we're going to face a Quins team who come off the back of a big loss with a well-established, good coaching team, and they're hurting. The challenge is completely different. And that's the pity of it. You just can't afford to celebrate it for that long, Kieran, unfortunately. You just got to get on with it and get yourself back on the ground.
What was the most pleasing aspect, performance-wise on Friday? The learnings from the mistake. When we spoke last week, when you spoke before the game to BT, kind of things like set piece, which didn't function well against Newcastle, was the fact that within the space of 7 days, the players understood what went wrong, and they went and kind of did the opposite of the mistakes, and they managed to fix those errors of their ways a week later.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you don't want to repeat the same mistakes twice in this game, otherwise the message hasn't got through, or you've got your methodology wrong, or you're just not good enough. I mean, that's the worst of it. Like, we believed we were good enough to compete and at very least get parity against the Leicester team, and on the day we did a bit more. But to repeat what happened at Newcastle, yeah, there'd be something inherently wrong with our methodology or our ability, and we proved that wasn't the case.
In terms of injury latest, then I know that Chris has kind of semi-asked that question. Are there any players that picked up injuries last weekend that aren't available this weekend, and any players who weren't available last weekend that are available this weekend?
Carps is back up for selection. That's it. Everyone else came through strong, which is another positive. You know, so it's a big positive, isn't it, as we know, Kieran? So we're all there. But I mean, like Roebuck's another week or two. You know, we've talked about George and Raf is like a week or two. Like it was close. He's in a white bib today, which means you can't hit him, unfortunately. But he's out there doing the sessions.
Bev Rod's still another week.
Sorry, no. Bev's up for selection. Like, I forgot about that one. How could I forget about him? He had to get through units and stuff today, and he came through strong. So.
And Dan, I think we confused our feet with our hands last week. Is it a metacarpal, not a metatarsal? And is it sort of 3 or 4 weeks?
It's a metacarpal is a finger, is it?
Metacarpals are the ones in the hand, and the metatarsals in the feet. I think we confused them.
We did.
Last week.
We did. Yeah, I said metatarsal. You correct me on metacarpal.
I think I agree with you last week, so I can't.
You agreed with me. It's your fault. I asked for your more in-depth knowledge of anatomy. It's not displaced. There is a split, so it doesn't have to be wired. All of this is positive, but he has broken it, which is a negative. That would mean he comes back for Bath. If he comes back, that's the earliest.
Jason Woodward, I know you said whether I asked you a week or two back, he had a niggle. Is he fully fit yet, or still on the way back?
No, he's on the way back in terms of getting robust, but he will be back for, again, around that Bath Prem Cup fixtures. It'd be great to see him. We need to see him. He needs to play, doesn't he? We're blessed. We're having Carps and Luca, both who are playing well at the moment.
Just one final one from me. Obviously, Joe Simpson retired after Friday's game. With Rafi coming back over the next couple of weeks, but then potentially away with England, Will Cliff having been injured so far this season, are there any plans to bring in another scrum half, or with players coming back from injury, are you content with the stocks of that position?
Right, as it stands right now, yeah, we are content. There was no plans to bring anyone else in. Cliffy has been training the last 2 weeks and looking all right for an old man. And in the slips, and this was intentional, you know, Nye Thomas, who was the England 20 scrum half last year, has been out on loan and getting some serious game time under his belt because he was a travelling reserve last year. So these young lads who were the reserve of the reserve never get any game time, never truly improve. You know, hence why we wanted Joe to come in so we could increase the rate of his progression. So he's there or thereabouts, we believe now. Who we pick, no one knows. But they're both up for selection this weekend, and we're happy with those three.
Great. Thanks, Alex.
Cheers.
Hi,
Thanks,
Alex.
Kieran.
Just a couple on Quins. I'm aware for the other Alex that there's only 5 minutes left on the meeting time, so eat up all that time.
Don't worry about. All right, the other Alex has to go, does he?
50p in the meeting, mate. But, I think last time you went down to Harlequins, you won big, didn't you? 36-14. That was on the back of a win against Leicester. So clearly you'll be hoping history repeats itself. Some would say it's a good time to play Quins, but you've just alluded to the fact that they're a wounded animal. But they are missing, aren't they, Marcus Smith? They are missing Joe Margler and some of their back three threats. So, you've got a golden opportunity there, haven't you, to kick on again?
We have got an opportunity. We have. It's just an opportunity. I think they got stuff by Leicester. I mean, if we're talking about history repeating itself, though, we were on a 5-game running streak coming to our own ground. They just got thumped by Leicester, and they end up physically dominating us the week later. And I think we went into that game thinking our physicality was a given. I certainly remember saying things which were derogatory and perhaps motivational for them. So I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to repeat the mistakes of my past, as I asked the lads not to last week. It's just an opportunity. Like, I do not believe this game, honestly. You think about Quins and you think about the fast break and the exciting and the entertaining rugby they play, the quick throws, the quick taps, the Danny Cares and the Don Brandts. I don't think it's going to be one of them kind of games. It might be. They might prove me wrong again. I think it's going to be one on physicality. I think it's going to be one on the gain line. I think set piece is going to come into it again, and it will open up at times. But it's going to be on the basics and the foundations of those core fundamentals that come down to mentality. That's what I believe.
Yeah, as much as the Leicester win just gone was a mega night, I suppose the home defeat to Harlequins earlier in the season in front of a big crowd was perhaps one of the bigger letdowns of the season, wasn't it? So there's motivation again for you anyway, isn't there?
There's a bit there, yeah. How were they going to respond from last week? How were we going to respond from the 22nd of October, I think it was? Not that I'm counting days and dates. Cheers.
Alex. Afternoon.
Alex. There's 3 Alexes, yeah.
You're right. Just one from me. You have already answered about George Ford, which was my interest. But just one question. When you signed George, did he come up to Sale thinking flat whites, or did he come up thinking this can get me back in the England team?
Good question. It's not a good question. It's insultive. It truly is. Like, if he was, he'd probably mic drop and walk out right now. The guy, in speaking to him, was so driven, so driven. It still is so driven, even at 70 caps, which is why he's such a brilliant individual. No, that was always part of the plan. His and mine, because my wants and desires for him have to be aligned with his wants and desires for his future. Which is why you need a couple of brilliant fly halves, like all the clubs that end up competing at the end of the years and have done over time have had a couple of decent halfbacks. We're lucky to have those now. So when you talk about Rob and George, I think the two can complement over the course of the season, have to complement each other. But it was always around how we can get him back to his best, playing his best rugby in a place where he's most proud.